Everyone talks about the Sigma male like it's something powerful, something rare, something almost perfect. The calm attitude, the silence, the independence, the ability to walk alone without needing anyone. It all looks strong from the outside. And because of that, people start thinking that this path has no weaknesses, no downsides, no cost. But that's where most people are wrong, because what nobody tells you is what it feels like behind that silence. At first, it feels like control. You stop reacting, you stop chasing, you stop depending on people, and everything becomes quieter. You think clearer, you move smarter, and you feel like you're finally in control of your life. But slowly, something changes. That same silence that gives you clarity starts creating distance. You become harder to relate to. Conversations feel empty. Small talk feels pointless. And even when you're surrounded by people, there's a part of you that feels separate, like you're there, but not really connected. And the more you grow, the more that gap becomes real. This is the part nobody shows. Because being a Sigma is not just about strength, it's also about carrying things alone. It's about thinking more than you speak, feeling more than you show, and dealing with things without always having someone to share it with. And over time, that can become heavy in ways most people don't understand. You don't break, but you feel it. You don't complain, but you carry it. And that's the dark side. It's not loud, it's not obvious, it's quiet, and that's what makes it harder to explain. Because from the outside, everything looks to control, but inside, there are moments where the weight is real. And here's the truth most people avoid. This path is not for everyone. Most people want the image, the calm, the respect, the mystery. But they don't want the isolation, the pressure, and the responsibility that comes with it. Because being independent means you don't rely on others. But it also means you don't always have someone there when things get heavy. That's the trade-off. But once you understand both sides, you stop moving blindly. You stop copying the image, and you start understanding the reality. And that's what makes the difference. If this kind of content speaks to you, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more videos on psychology, mindset, and human behavior that most people never pay attention to. Because once you start seeing things like this, you don't go back. And now think about this. Are you really choosing this path because it makes you stronger, or because you've just learned how to be alone? Drop your answer in the comments. He feels disconnected from most people. At the beginning, it doesn't feel like a problem. It actually feels like growth, because you start noticing things you didn't notice before. The way people talk just to fill silence, the way they follow trends without thinking, and the way their decisions are driven more by emotion than awareness. And slowly you begin to feel like you don't fully belong in that pattern anymore. Not because you're better than them, but because you simply see things differently. Conversations that once felt normal start to feel empty. Small talk becomes something you tolerate instead of enjoy. You listen, you understand, but you don't always relate. And that creates a quiet gap between you and most people. They are reacting, laughing, talking, and you are there but thinking deeper, observing more, and questioning things they don't even notice. Over time, this distance grows naturally. You become more selective, not because you want to isolate yourself, but because you can't force connection where there is no depth. You stop trying to fit in, you stop pretending just to feel included, and that's where the separation becomes real. And the difficult part is that this creates a different kind of loneliness. Not the type where you are physically alone, but the type where you are surrounded by people and still feel like no one truly understands you. You can be part of conversations, part of groups, even part of moments. But deep down there is a feeling of distance that doesn't go away. And the more aware you become, the more you feel it. Because when your mindset changes, your environment doesn't always change with you. And that creates a silent disconnect that most people never talk about. And that's the dark side of awareness. Because sometimes the more you understand people, the less you feel understood by them. His circle becomes extremely small. At first, it feels like progress, because you start cutting distractions, distancing yourself from people who waste your time, and focusing more on your growth. You realize that not everyone deserves access to you, so you become selective. You stop entertaining meaningless conversations, and you stop keeping people around just to avoid being alone. But over time, something changes. The more selective you become, the smaller your circle gets. People you once talked to every day slowly disappear. Conversations fade, connections weaken, and it's not always because something bad happened. Sometimes you just don't align the same way anymore. You're growing, thinking differently, and moving differently. At first, you don't feel it too much because you're focused and building yourself. But then you start noticing that there are fewer people you can truly talk to, fewer people who understand your mindset, and fewer people who match your level of thinking. And that's when it becomes real. Because having a small circle sounds good until it becomes almost empty. You can go days without real conversation, weeks without deep connection. And even when you talk to people, it feels surface level, like something is missing. And that's where the silence becomes heavier. The Sigma male chooses quality over quantity, but that choice comes with a cost. Because while most people accept average connections just to feel something, he doesn't. And that makes his world quieter, more controlled, but also more isolated in ways most people don't understand. He carries everything alone. At first, it feels like strength, because you don't depend on anyone, you don't complain, and you don't feel the need to share every problem you go through. You handle things quietly, think about solutions, and move forward without asking for help. And that gives you a sense of control. But over time, that control becomes heavy because life doesn't slow down. Problems keep coming, pressure keeps building, and responsibilities increase. And you are still dealing with everything alone. No sharing, no release, just constant thinking and handling. At first, you tell yourself it's better this way, that you're strong enough, that you don't need anyone, but slowly, you start feeling the weight. Not in a dramatic way, but in silence. Moments where everything feels too much. But instead of opening up, you push it down and keep going like nothing happened. And that's where it becomes difficult, because when you don't express what you carry, it doesn't disappear. It stays inside, builds up, and turns into pressure that you deal with alone. And even if you manage it, it still takes energy. The problem is not that you can't handle it. The problem is that you're always handling it alone. And over time, that creates a habit where you stop even thinking about sharing, because you're used to solving everything by yourself. And that's the dark side of independence. Because while it makes you strong, it also makes everything heavier. And the more you carry alone, the more you realize that strength without support is not always easy, it's just quiet. He overthinks everything. At first, it feels like awareness, because you notice details others miss. You understand situations more deeply, and you don't react blindly like most people. You take your time, analyze what's happening, and try to see every angle before making a decision, and that gives you an advantage. But over time, that awareness turns into something heavier, because you don't just think when it's necessary, you think all the time. Every situation, every conversation, every small detail gets analyzed again and again. You replay moments in your head, question meanings, and look for hidden reasons behind things that most people would ignore. At first, it feels like control, but slowly it becomes exhausting, because your mind never really stops. Even when nothing is happening, you are still thinking, still analyzing, still trying to understand everything, and that constant activity creates pressure. Instead of clarity, it sometimes creates confusion, because the more you think, the more possibilities you see, and the harder it becomes to decide, because every option comes with doubts, and every decision feels like it needs more thinking. And that's where it becomes a problem, because you're not just aware, you're trapped in your own thoughts. You spend more time inside your head than in the moment, and that distance makes it harder to relax or just let things be. The Sigma mindset gives you depth, but too much depth can pull you away from simplicity. And that's the balance most people don't talk about, because thinking is powerful, but when it never stops, it becomes a weight. And over time, you realize something important. Awareness is strength, but without control, it can turn into something that drains you more than it helps you. He struggles to express emotions. At first, it feels like control, because you don't react like everyone else. You stay calm, you don't show everything you feel, and you don't let emotions take over your actions. And that gives you an advantage because you stay composed while others lose control. But over time, that control becomes distance, because you get used to keeping things inside. You feel things deeply, but you don't show them. You go through situations that affect you, but instead of talking about them, you process everything alone. And slowly expressing emotions starts to feel unnatural. You don't know when to open up, how to explain what you feel, or even who to trust with it, so you stay silent. Even when something is bothering you, you move like nothing happened, and from the outside everything looks fine. But inside, it's different, because emotions don't disappear just because you don't express them. They stay, they build up, and even if you stay calm on the outside, there's a weight that doesn't get released. This creates distance with people, because they don't fully understand you. They see the calm version, but not the depth behind it. And because you don't express, they don't connect. And because they don't connect, you express even less. And that becomes a cycle. Silence creates distance, and distance makes silence stronger, until you become someone who feels everything but shows almost nothing. And that's the dark side of control, because while it protects you from reacting, it also prevents you from releasing what you feel. And over time, that silence becomes something you carry instead of something you control. So now you see the full picture. Being a Sigma male is not just about strength, control, and independence. It's also about the weight that comes with it, the silence, the distance, the pressure, and the things you carry without showing. And while most people only see the calm surface, they don't see what's happening underneath. The truth is, this path is not for everyone, because it requires you to face things alone, to think deeply, and to handle parts of yourself that most people avoid. And while it can make you stronger, it can also make things heavier in ways you don't expect. But the key is balance, not losing yourself in isolation, not letting silence turn into distance, and not confusing control with shutting everything down. Because real strength is not just about holding everything in, it's also about knowing when to release it. If this made you see things differently, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more content on psychology, mindset, and human behavior that most people never understand. Because once you start seeing both sides of this mindset, you move smarter. And now I want to ask you something. Be honest with yourself. Are you choosing this path because it makes you stronger, or because you've just learned how to deal with everything alone? Drop your answer in the comments.